The Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies is not passing a resolution to acknowledge Biden as the president-elect. The resolution was put forth by a Democrat chairman, but was rejected by 3 Republican members. This resolution would have set in motion preparations for Joe Biden's inauguration as president, but the 6-member committee hit a tie vote, which means they're not formally recognizing Biden as president-elect. Republican Chairman Roy Blunt says it's not the job of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies to get ahead of the electoral process and decide who we're inaugurating. The Chinese Communist Party hosted a conference backed by Communist Party leader Xi Jinping. Among those in attendance, a CNN host and an advisor to Joe Biden's presidential campaign. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
Now we look to a conference organized by the Chinese Communist Party. CNN anchor Fareed Zakaria and advisor to Joe Biden's presidential campaign, Lawrence Summers, attended a conference last month. The international conference was hosted by the CCP. Every year, CCP head Xi Jinping supported the conference by sending letters or meeting with attendees. This year, his letter was read aloud at the conference, promoting CCP narratives such as so-called success against poverty in China. The nearly 20 Chinese speakers are all high-level CCP officials. It includes the director of a state-run think tank's research institute for Marxism, Leninism, and Mao Zedong thought, and a vice president of the Central Institute of Socialism, who is directing the United Front Work Department. The U.S. has accused this department of overseeing the CCP's foreign influence operations by coordinating thousands of overseas organizations to spread the CCP's propaganda, as well as influencing local elites and suppressing Chinese dissident groups. Titled Understanding China, the conference aimed to boost cooperation between the Chinese Communist Party and the rest of the world, and to, as they called it, build a community with a shared future for mankind. Well-known Westerners were needed to assist the Chinese Communist Party in this sense. Among the Western celebrities were former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown, sitting president of German Federal Parliament Wolfgang Schäuble, also a former German Minister of Finance.
A Michigan lawmaker is telling the CEO of Dominion to choose between testifying before lawmakers or being subpoenaed.
More people.
A Michigan lawmaker is threatening to subpoena the CEO of Dominion Voting System. In a letter obtained by the Epoch Times, the Republican lawmaker said Dominion CEO John Poulos has ignored his invitation to testify before state lawmakers. The lawmaker says that he is writing again to invite Poulos and, quote, if Dominion chooses to ignore this second request to come, I am prepared to seek legislative subpoena power to compel your appearance. I am hopeful that it would not come to this. Dominion makes both election equipment and software. The company provides systems in 28 American states, including Michigan. In the state's Antrim County, Dominion's software switched 6,000 Trump votes to Biden votes. State election officials say it was a result of accidental error. Meanwhile, President Trump's campaign team is asking Michigan's Supreme Court to declare the election process has violated the state's constitution. They argued that Michigan State Secretary allowed illegal ballots to be counted and failed to ensure poll watchers to oversee and challenge the voting process. Numerous Republican poll watchers in Detroit have said in sworn affidavits and in a state hearing that they were harassed, mistreated, and prohibited from doing their jobs. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
The Secretary of State called Georgia for Biden again. This even with multiple investigations on election fraud still open. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more.
Governor Kemp today again reiterating his point that he is in no position under the law to call a special session to overturn the state's election results. But he did say that he trusts the legislators will do their part and exercise their constitutional rights as it relates to this election.
For us to call a special session because of evidence that was presented in a Senate hearing does not address the way that evidence should be used to alter an election in Georgia. That process, by law, is set up to go to the courts.
But even without Kemp calling a special session, the state legislators can act under federal law and appoint their own electors.
According to the constitutional attorney that was here, or actually wasn't here, but he testified with Giuliani, he said it doesn't require any process that's been put in place by the state of Georgia, that they can do that on their own.
And it looks like a group of Georgia senators are doing just that. We know of at least 4 that have signed a petition in order to call a special session to elect their own slate of electors. They're acting under their rights under the federal law. So that means potentially, if they do that, it will send 2 slates of electors to Vice President Mike Pence, and that possibly could lead to a situation where neither Joe Biden or President Trump reaches the 270 electoral votes that they need, and then the Congress will have to get involved, and that could possibly overturn the results.
Amendment 12 in the U.S. Constitution, they would vote on it. Each state has 1 vote.
Since Georgia has a Republican majority House right now, that means if Congress votes, most of Georgia's representatives would likely vote for Trump, thus overturning the Secretary of State's certified results. At the same time, a group of concerned citizens from the Had Enough coalition started a petition to urge Governor Kemp and the Secretary of State to make changes to ensure the integrity of the Senate runoffs.
We as Georgia residents are carrying the weight of this entire nation for this election. And right now, our voices are not being heard when it comes to some constraints that can be had for January 5th that were not there for the November 3rd election, of which
they collected 2,000 signatures in 24 hours and came to the Capitol to give them to Kemp. They threw them under the tree to symbolize that all they want for Christmas is a fair election. Reporting in Atlanta, Georgia, Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies is not passing a resolution to acknowledge Biden as the president-elect. The resolution was put forth by a Democrat chairman, but was rejected by 3 Republican members. This resolution would have set in motion preparations for Joe Biden's inauguration as president, but the 6-member committee hit a tie vote, which means they're not formally recognizing Biden as president-elect. Republican Chairman Roy Blunt says it's not the job of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies to get ahead of the electoral process and decide who we're inaugurating. The Chinese Communist Party hosted a conference backed by Communist Party leader Xi Jinping. Among those in attendance, a CNN host and an advisor to Joe Biden's presidential campaign. NTV's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
Now we look to a conference organized by the Chinese Communist Party. CNN anchor Fareed Zakaria